Hello everyone, welcome back. Going to do a movie review. Today I'm going to talk about Lifeforce. See the poster there. The tagline is, "In the blink of an eye, the terror begins." So Lifeforce was released in 1985. It was directed by Tobe Hooper. It was put out by Canon Films. This is a sci-fi horror film because it has elements of horror to it and some other genres. This is a wild movie with shifting tones and some interesting themes, and it's really all over the place and a real kind of unique sci-fi film from the 1980s. As I mentioned, Tobe Hooper directing it. Of course, he had made one of the greatest horror films of all time, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and continued to work after that. Of course, he directed Poltergeist, working with Spielberg on that film, and Canon would give Hooper a 3-movie deal, and he also would do a remake of Invaders from Mars, which I'll talk about in a future video. But anyway, Lifeforce. This film is based on a novel by Colin Wilson called The Space Vampires, and yeah, it's a sci-fi movie about vampirism, which we don't see too often. This film has a big cast, mostly a British cast in this film. It was mostly filmed in London, and so it's a strong British component to it. There's the American in the cast, Steve Railsback, sort of has the lead role as the commander of a space mission. Peter Firth plays a investigator back on Earth and has a main role. There's Matilda May. I'll talk about her character. Patrick Stewart appears briefly, kind of a pre-Captain Picard Patrick Stewart. So what is this movie about? As I said, it goes into many different directions. So we start out in space, where there's a space mission. Halley's Comet, which was 86, was the year Halley's Comet. So we have a space mission out doing scientific exploration of the comet. They come upon a very strange spaceship, and they go inside this other ship, and they discover bats in there, giant bats, like vampires, and they also find 3 humanoid figures also inside this very strange ship. Okay, so that's really what gets the story going. And they bring these humanoids back to Earth, who appear to be in a coma, but as it turns out, they are not. They are actually vampires who are going to start a plague on Earth. So there's a strong apocalyptic component to the film as well. So, and they're not typical vampires in that they're not after your blood, they're after your life force. Okay, so as we later find out, what happened on the spaceship is that they basically sucked the entire life out of everybody on the crew. So they're like kind of reduced to these fleshy skeletons. Railsback was the only survivor of this mission. So then the movie shifts back to Earth in London, where they're investigating these extraterrestrials. They awake and escape, and they start infecting other humans, is what happens. And the film is abstract about this because there's a lot of shape shifting going on, where these beings can inhabit the bodies of other people for a while, and so there's a lot of like shape shifting and a lot of that happening in the story. So we start out as kind of a space horror film. We move into more of a vampire horror film. It becomes a kind of a detective film for a while, where they're trying to figure out what's going on. And then finally, for the final act, we move into more of a zombie apocalyptic film, where they are infecting most of London, and people are turning into zombies. So that's the story. Like I said, I know Tobe Hooper did say he wished the screenplay had been a little bit better, but in a way it works, though. I think as how much the film is switching off into different directions. There's some of the themes in the film. One of the big themes is desire and attraction, and the main humanoid they discover in the ship is a young woman who all the men are extremely attracted to. And there is a lot of nudity in this movie, I should say, as well. And she's often, I think, the entire movie, she's not wearing anything, which made the movie controversial in 1985. And it's about, that's always been a part of Empire stories, the attraction and the allure of it. And so this film really follows that theme of us becoming controlled by our desires and it leading to our downfall. So there's kind of that aspect to it. We're also in the 80s. Some have read into this movie as commenting on the fear of the AIDS epidemic and how sexual activity can lead to contagion and disease. So there's a little bit of that in the film as well, as there were in many films of the 1980s. And the whole idea of bodies being energy too, how it's, there's the idea that you can take someone else's energy from them and kind of make yourself stronger is an interesting idea, and kind of how these invaders operate in the film. So yeah, there's a lot of connections between fear, attraction, and sexuality are big parts of themes in the movie, I should say. I mean, there's also like kind of a Lovecraft element where a lot of it's abstract, the horror, where the human characters are really facing something that we really don't understand what these beings are capable of doing or how they even operate. It seems as if they are able to quickly take over and capable of doing things way beyond human understanding. So there's that this encounter with, it's not like a typical alien invasion movie where the aliens land and they want to take over, and it's very kind of militaristic type thing. This movie is more psychological in that sense, and as far as how they operate. So there is definitely that aspect, this abstract theme running through the film. So just a few more things on Lifeforce. It has a great film score by Henry Mancini. Really good score throughout it, which it has sci-fi elements, it has horror elements, and has more quieter romantic themes. So there's a really good score to Lifeforce, and I think Tobe Hooper did a good job directing it. I think he got a lot of great shots, and Canon put a lot of money into this film, and it definitely shows on screen. So the direction and the score are quite good. I think the legacy is kind of an outlier for 1980 science fiction, where it's not following a typical formula. In fact, it kind of goes in the opposite direction. The film is just going off in many different directions. So that's also, I think, something that makes Lifeforce unique. So it's definitely a bit of I don't know if you call it a cult classic, but definitely an outlier. Outlier would be the better word for 1980s science fiction. So is one of the big legacies of Lifeforce. So I would recommend the film if you're, but maybe this one's more for really strong devotees of science fiction films. Like I said, this one it's a strongly British science fiction film as well. I think with its attitude and with the look of things. London plays a big role in the story, so there's that aspect to it. In some ways, you could connect it to a lot of the Hammer horror films of the 50s and 60s and 70s. There's a lot of that vibe to Lifeforce as well. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on Lifeforce. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.